Well, hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. We are worldwide, and I have to tell you, we have a record-breaking attendance of 220 registrants. So thank you very much for doing that for our webinar, Steering Production Toward Targets Using the LPS System of Production Control, which is sponsored by vPlanner and presented by Samir M. Donat from vPlanner as well. And Samir, I know I just mispronounced your name, and I apologize. I will get it right next time. There's a couple of housekeeping items I'd like to go over before we get started. First is I'm Eileen Goldberg with LCI. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. You'll also notice the long skinny box on the right-hand side of your screen. That's your control panel. There's a red arrow to the left of that box. That's the minimization and maximization arrow. Please feel free to use that throughout the presentation so you can view the presentation more closely. Also, this is being recorded. A copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent out by Samir by close of business tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. Also, you'll notice at the bottom of your control panel, there's a questions box. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in that box. They'll be answered at the end of the presentation. This will also be an interactive webinar. There will be polls at the beginning of the presentation, so be on the lookout for those. And if you are in a group, please take the consensus of the group and vote that way. Again, this is being recorded. A copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent out by Samir by close of business tomorrow. You have the control panel with the minimization and maximization arrow. We're also going to be doing a quick plus delta at the end of the presentation. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, pluses are things you thought added value to the presentation. Deltas are things you think we should change to add more value to the presentation. In the spirit of continuous improvement, we absolutely want that feedback so we can make sure our webinars are exactly what you'd like to hear. Again, we'd like to thank Samir and vPlanner for sponsoring and presenting this webinar, and all of you for attending, and we hope you have a fantastic time on the webinar. Samir, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Eileen. Welcome, everybody. So I'm Samir M. Donat. I'm president co-founder of vPlanner, and today's webinar is going to be about, oops, sorry. Eileen, am I still sharing? I think
You are now, yes.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to turn off my camera and I messed it up. All right. So today's webinar is going to be about work we've been doing since about 2014-ish about LPS metrics. We've shared that with the industry through publications. It is now part of the LPS system metrics. But unfortunately, they haven't gained a lot of wide traction for various reasons. So I'm going to cover what we call the enhanced LPS metrics. And the way I'm going to cover those is through basically how they evolved and why they evolved and why we created them. And hopefully, they'll resonate with many teams that implement the LPS system and they find them useful. So for those that are not familiar with vPlanner, I'm going to introduce who we are. So many of you probably know us as a software provider, but we're also a lean management. We provide coaching services, lean managers provide coaching services, and we offer production planning and control services to many project teams. So the part we'll be talking about today is our experience on the lean coaching side, informed by work we do, obviously, with the tools, because the two are one enhances the other. But before we start, let's get a sense of who's on the webinar. So Eileen, if you want to just do the two surveys quickly to get a sense of who's with us, so I can focus the presentation.
Absolutely. The first poll has been launched. What type of organization do you represent? An owner, a designer or engineer, general contractor or EPC, a trade contractor or other? And if you do put other, please let us know in the questions box exactly what type of organization you represent. Okay. We have the votes coming in. We're going to leave it open for another couple seconds. Please get those votes in. And again, if you do put other, please put in the questions box exactly what type of organization you represent. Right, we're going to close the poll and I'm going to share the results with everyone. Looks like most of us are general contractors or EPCs. There's 53%, 19% designer or engineer, 14% are others, and Samar, I'll let you know once we have any in the questions box. Academia, we have one, 10% are owners, and 5% are trade contractors.
All right.
So we're going to go on to our next poll here, which is, what is your level of familiarity with LPS? Are you aware of it? Are you a beginner with it? Or are you an advanced with familiarity with LPS? And LPS, of course, if you are not familiar, does mean the last planner system. Okay. Let's see, we also have construction manager to the other, an operations management researcher interested in lean construction from Ohio State University. Thank you so much for putting those in, everybody. All right, we're going to close the poll and share the results with everyone. Let's see, we have 45% that said a beginner, 29% that said aware, and 27% that said advanced.
Excellent. All right, so that would help. So for those that are very familiar with the last planner system, you'll get my perspective on how the system evolved. And for the newbies, let's say, to last planner, I'll try to explain the main pieces of the system. The focus here is the metrics, so I won't really go into how the system mechanics work, but more about how we capture the results and the metrics of work production planning in the last planner system. So we operate in various industries. So these are some of the markets we serve, both on the coaching side and on the production planning side and on the software side. Our focus is on, maybe I should rephrase this, when the picture, the mental image that one gets when we look at a team implementing the last planner system is what you see in this fuzzy image in the background, where you have a number of team members in front of a wall, writing on sticky notes and moving them around, and talking about them, which is basically the essence of the system. It's about creating a conversation about the work sequence, getting to the right work sequence that works for the team, trying to identify what can and can't be done. And that's how we approach it as well, but we approach it with rigor. Our work in the coaching side and the production management side is really getting to the core, the mechanics of how the production system works. We focus on flow. We go to the root cause of variation in the workflow, and we implement rigorous systems that go behind what you see on the wall so that we can manage the information. So the sticky notes, whether virtual or physical, are a means to have a conversation, but we don't stop there. That is, we want to capture the essence of the conversation, get the information, let the information help us organize and build a production system. And that's really what we focus on when we implement or engage in a project to help them get to a higher level through their implementation of the last planner system. And to do that, over the years, we needed some guidance, some metrics. So that's what we'll be talking about, these enhanced last planner metrics. And our goal from the webinar, like I said before, is to increase the awareness that there are more than just PPC metrics out there for last planner. We'll talk about why we needed the metrics, what created the context for the metrics. We'll explain the metrics, how to interpret them when you use them in a production environment, and then how the whole last planner system works with the combined metrics that we'll be talking about, how we can use the last planner system now with these integrated metrics to drive production towards targets, which is the real reason the system exists, is to create the reliability, not just for the near-term planning, but also reliability at hitting the targets. That's otherwise, why are we planning? And then we'll talk about some critical success factors that lead to a better implementation. So I'll tell this through a story, because these metrics evolved over the years, and they really don't make sense until we get them in perspective, in the context of how we kind of backed ourselves into discovering that we need improved metrics. So before Last Planner, the way the industry operated, obviously, is through schedules, the master schedule. That becomes the baseline schedule, the contract schedule. And there was an assumption that, the master schedule gets issued to the team, and the team looks at the schedule and works off of the schedule. And then we meet often, and we update tasks that are completed, and we talk about some of the struggles. So back in the 90s, Glenn Ballard and Greg Howell started looking at, does this really work? So they basically, the first assumption is, if the schedule as published tells us what are planned activities, so these are the planned activities based on the schedule, how much of those actually get done? So that was a study that they started collecting data from various projects without really interfering with how the projects are running. We're just looking at what's getting done, compare it to what the schedule says should be done. So what the schedule says is the planned tasks, and what is being done is what's being done on the work plans on a weekly basis. And the idea was to see, is this working? And so the thing they done, I think, that changed the industry, is they just divided the number of tasks that the team completes against the number of tasks that the schedule says they should complete. And early results, that's from an unpublished paper by Glenn, 35 to 50% PPC on some significant EPC projects. So that was obviously not acceptable. And being lean-minded, they started thinking about, well, what can be done to improve the percentage of what gets done on a weekly basis. And that was the genesis of the Last Planner system. So the fix was to say, okay, there is the realm of project controls, that's the master schedule. Now we need a system that allows us to improve production management and control. So project controls is what we have in the master schedule. And then on the near term, let's try to stabilize the project by implementing production control mechanisms. The most important one was, well, things don't get done because of constraints, because when they did the studies, they were tracking why things don't get done. There's a lot of stuff that happen that cause variation in the workflow. And the countermeasure was, okay, let's improve the make-ready process, the look-ahead plan. And the way they implemented that by building mechanisms in the system that says, let's screen what the master schedule says, and let's not let anything in the make-ready process, in the near-term plan, go on that we know can't start or finish within the look-ahead horizon, the window of time in the near term. And then let's do another rule, says if the workers know that something cannot start or finish within the near term, the very, very near term, a week's worth of work, let's say, then we're going to shield the workers from work that we know cannot be done. So they implemented two rules that allowed the look-ahead process to stabilize and the work plan to stabilize. And they started monitoring, and that created the terms that we use now. The schedule tells us what should be done. The make-ready process allows us to see what can be done. The work plan tells us what will be done, and the commitments would tell us what was done. And then if there is variances, why we have variances, so we can continuously improve the can, will, did work. So now the meaning of PPC changed. If you've noticed on the previous slide, it was the scheduled work, so that was what was called the planned work, against the work that was done. So they were comparing what was done against the schedule. Now they're comparing what was promised against what was completed from what was promised. It's still called PPC, but it means something else, because there is two or multiple new elements in the production control mechanisms that allows us now to improve the or measure the how the system is working. So the goal was to improve, the goal of the last planner system was to improve the quality of assignments and understand the root cause for variation so it can be reduced, and that stabilizes the workflow and obviously will flow more and more. They captured constraints so that the team members can go and resolve the constraints from the look-ahead process before they affect the work on the work plan. And then new metrics were invented, the tasks anticipated and the TMR metrics. So that was the beginnings of the last planner system, and many teams in the industry still do just that. The challenge with this approach is that the problem of the master schedule to the production control was not really addressed in detail. So the assumption was that the make-ready process is going to get tasks fed from the master schedule, and then the team will make them ready and commit to them, and then perform the work, and will capture the variances. And then on these gates, the screening and shielding rules, hopefully they will provide some good feedback mechanism to improve the master schedule. But the core issue is the baseline against the forecast and how the contracts work. That was not really fixed in the original last planner. So what happened over time in the industry is that, and this still happens to this date, is we get called into a big room or a team that's about to start last planner, and there is a coach in the room, and they sit down and they start preparing for what they're going to do on the pull plan, and they start reading off of the master schedule and writing on sticky notes, and they start populating the look ahead based on tasks from the master schedule. So that's prevailing. It hasn't changed even from 1993 until now. There's many teams that still do that. So there's a lot of duplicate information. The schedule might already be out of sync. There is milestones in the schedule that have come and gone because the baseline schedule. So there's this confusion as well. What are we planning towards? Is this a recovery plan or is this a look ahead plan? That's all a mix in everybody's head because it hasn't been sorted out. Usually screening and shielding are ignored. So the tasks end up on the look ahead plan, and if they don't get done, they get moved to the following week. And so there is confusion on what are the concepts of the screening rule, who's responsible for doing the screening, who's responsible for doing the shielding, how does the feedback go back to the master schedule, and what happens with the master schedule, and how is the whole thing working as a system. And obviously constraints are still kept in log files, and there's a lot of recommendation in the industry, thou shalt capture constraints in a log file. And by just doing so, they're separate from the plan, so you create an effort to manage that independent of the production system. And then there's the confusion between what is critical, what is required, what is backlog, and is it all treated equally on the CAN part of the last planner system in the make ready, or is there a priority given to required work versus backlog? The system, when it's implemented in analog tools, is disjointed. So it's very hard to see the impact immediately when something slips. Is the priority changing, and what is impacting the milestones if we're interested in hitting the targets. And then there is this debate that emerged over time about sandbagging and targets for PPC. Is it 75%? So this is history, and some of this is still in people's minds because we see it when we work with teams. There's a belief that PPC's target should be 75%, 80%, and there's arguments to go, if it's 100%, there's sandbagging going on and the fear of that. So that's kind of context. That doesn't mean that every team does that. There are some teams that do this really well, but it's a lot of these observations are still present in the industry. If you look at PPC, it says promises made against promises done against promises made. It says nothing about if the team is promising enough work to stay on track. There's nothing in that metric that measures the team's ability to consume the plan that they have come up with at the right rate to hit their targets. So that metric, from our perspective, when we started looking at PPC, was a team's reliability metric. Is the team good for their word, basically? But it doesn't say anything about if they are doing enough work to hit their targets. So we started looking for better metrics. So now in 2016 benchmark, the industry evolved. There was recognition that there's something to be done in the middle there between the master schedule and make-ready planning. And the concept of reverse phase scheduling and phase planning or pull planning emerged as a way to try to bridge the gap between the long-range plans on the project, the master schedule targets, and the detailed work execution in the production planning realm. And that's what completed the last planner system. So now the last planner system, about the 2016 timeframe, is recognized to include phase planning and a way to bridge to milestone planning in the master schedule as a way to create a fix to bad schedules. So if the schedule is the baseline schedule and hasn't been updated, it has a lot of late paths, and the team hasn't agreed on the sequence, we could do a better job at make-ready planning if the team works backwards from a target and sequences the work so that they can properly implement a make-ready plan, weekly work plan, and commitments. vPlanner started in 2013. So at that point in time, that was the understanding of the last planner system, and we implemented it as a system exactly the way you see it on the picture here, where the teams can go, do collaborative planning, do the pull plan, we link everything together, we extract the make-ready process, we allow the team to work together to do to improve the look ahead, create the constraints, make the work plan, and commit. And now the system is functioning as a complete system. So that's how last planner was envisioned at that point in time, and that's how we implemented vPlanner, early versions of vPlanner. So now the software is implementing the process, and the process is informing the software, and how we are engaging with the teams is informing how we react to improving both how we coach, how we implement production planning, and how we track. Our observations as we started using this is that still confusion about baseline schedules and phase plans, still an unresolved issue. We often work with teams that would put milestones on the plan. They do the pull plan tells us, or the phase plan tells us that we're several months off from the target because never been updated. And then there is this reluctance to change anything because the contract says, well, that's the date. So the confusion between what we contracted to do and what we're able to do is unresolved, and creates confusion for the production planning system. Many teams implement this, so if they're using vPlanner or not, the analog tools fragment the information. So if they're using a system, at least they're knowing. If they're not using a system, it's very hard to know because the information gets fragmented. And then there was really no clear distinction made in how last planner is implemented with the look ahead process to figure out what is critical and backlog. That was a fuzzy notion and remained a fuzzy notion. So about 2014 to 2016, we started seeing teams trying to fix the issue by going and looking at TAC planning as an approach to stabilize workflow, and at line of balance. We've used both back then, line of balance quite a bit to try to control the work better and let it flow at the phase level. To be able to create better milestone schedules, these mechanisms were started to be introduced into the mainstream of the last planner system. So here are the metrics that we tracked back then. Obviously, the percent planned complete. So this is from 2015. Our metrics used to look like that in vPlanner. And then we wanted to put this in perspective because, looking at 89% PPC on 2 tasks is different from 89% on 1,000 tasks. So we always looked at how many tasks the team is putting on the work plan and how many tasks are they completing in the context of the same percentage. But because we had a comprehensive pull system, we're able to also measure if the team is working on the right tasks for the work plan. So we didn't know what to call it at the time. So we would see, based on the pull, that we have certain tasks that need to start but can't start. So we called those required tasks. And then how many of those required tasks actually make it to the work plan. So in the same work plan cycle, we would show the team in this blue bar at the bottom how many required minimum tasks they should have on the work plan and how many of those actually get on the work plan. And we started using that with teams to drive priorities during the commitment cycle. It's all available work potentially. So is it getting committed to or not? And the observation there, without really, with only focusing on the percent planned complete, is that we started seeing teams get to high levels of PPC and still miss their targets. When we started implementing the required backlog measurement, we started seeing teams focus more on the critical work that is showing up in the look ahead and trying to improve their consumption of that type of work and then prioritize it over work in the backlog. So that we started seeing behavioral change in the team just simply by showing the team before they make the work plan what are the tasks that they should focus on as a measure. And then we measure it and report on it. So when we look at PPC, is it PPC on the critical work or is it PPC on the backlog work? So the definitions that led to the development of the metrics are these. So these are all new definitions of work that help us implement the new metrics. So I'll go over those and then we'll talk about the new metrics. So total required tasks, this is the should part of the last planner system. So now we have a way to measure that. And the way we define this is that the total number of tasks that must start or finish within the work plan horizon, prioritized based on pulling from a downstream target. So the pull tells us what we need to start or finish within the work plan horizon. And then the backlog work is simply the work that does not need to start or finish within the work plan horizon, or if it doesn't start or finish, it won't impact the downstream milestone for that work plan. Next week, it could become critical, but for the current work plan, it's not showing as required work. So now the team has a way, if we can visually show this to the team and show it quickly while they're about to make their commitments for the next week, they're able to focus on what they should be focusing on, which is keeping the milestones on track, especially if they have limited resources and many things open up. We can have the resources go on what matters for this week and then deal with what matters for next week, and make it very transparent to the team. And obviously the work plan horizon is simply the window of time where we need to go and check if we're working at the right pace. So it's just the end of the work plan, whatever that is. It could be a week, it could be 2 days, it doesn't matter. That's what we call the work plan horizon. And one last thing we needed is to figure out of all the required tasks that are needed for that week, how many actually are getting committed to. We call that the required will. So now we have these terms that became part of the jargon on projects that have the rigor when they are looking at their work plan. So it's like what should be done and what is required, that's on the work plan from what should be done, that's the required will. So here's the first new metric is commitment level, and it's basically a pairing of the required will work, that's what the team promised from what is required, against the should work. That's what is all the required work for that work plan. That becomes a percentage. And in English, all it's going to measure is, are we committing to enough work to keep the targets on track? And the goal for that is 100% for each work plan cycle. If it's not 100%, then the team should start thinking about replanning during the work plan cycle or trying to accelerate to stay on track. And then the work plan is complete. At the end of the work plan, we measure how much of the required work actually got done versus what is required at the end of the week. And that's now kind of gives the team a chance to replan during the week. And then we check if the replanning worked, because they could start with a low commitment level at the start of the week, replan the work, and end up with a very high percent required complete. So they get basically rewarded for trying to replan during the week. So the goal for both commitment level and percent required complete is 100%, and anything less should trigger replanning. Now, teams are very smart. So one way to keep both of these metrics high is to move the target. So we needed a way to create a closed system. The pull plan is the work. We wanted to be able to track if the target is static and the plan is evolving, or the target and the plan are evolving, contributing to a higher percentage of commitment level in PRC. So milestone variance is how you know that. So every work plan, when it starts, we capture the variance of the work on the pull plan to the target. And if the target hasn't moved, the forecast would move if we're running late. The forecast would match the target if we're on target. And now we have basically a compass that would tell us we're driving to a fixed destination or we're driving towards a movable target. And this image here shows you the scope of these enhanced metrics. They cover the entire steps of the last planner metric, and they're for the first time now a bridge between the near-term plan, which is the look ahead, the weekly work plan, and the commitments, all the way to the target, measured on a weekly work plan basis. The focus is the remaining work and how the remaining work, as planned by the team, affects the targets. And we're able for the first time now to show this to the team in a way that basically grabs their attention while they are either in the look ahead, because we can do that not just at the weekly work plan level, but also at the look ahead level. And that guides how they approach planning. We want them to focus on the things that matter and leave the backlog to the following week, because they'll have more time to think about that. So started also looking at guidance. How do we guide? How do we know you have a reliable team? So we started measuring this over time. So a reliable team would maintain these metrics, all three metrics, at a higher percentage. The goal is 100%, but a goal is a goal. There is variation in the workflow, and it's very hard to achieve 100%. But a team that has some variation and is constantly replanning, their metrics would look like what you see over there. So that's a very reliable team. They're committing to what they should be committing to. They're finishing what they should be finishing. And overall, when they have a work plan that has critical work and backlog work, their PPC metric would capture their reliability overall, because PPC measures how much was done from what was promised. The commitment levels measures if they're starting the right number of things, and the percent required complete measures if they're finishing the right number of things, ignoring the backlog. So that's what a reliable team would look like. If a team fails at replanning, so let's say their commitment level is low the first week, they do nothing to the plan in terms of replanning, their commitment level, because of late paths in the plan, would drop the following week and will continue to drop because they're not altering the future. It's, if you think of this as somebody who's driving constant speed and they're making the wrong turns, they're gonna miss their arrival time by quite a bit. So that's what that would look like for a team that is pretty reliable. They finish what they say they will start, but they are getting further and further away from their target. Projects encounter variation. Sometimes it's uncontrolled variation, and the metrics could look like that. The team could start reliable. They run into a problem they didn't anticipate. They scramble a little bit, so that's what you're seeing as the scramble. It's a reliable team because their PPC in the orange line is stay high, so they're still finishing what they can, but they are running into problems that causes them not to be able to start enough work. They replan, and their project snaps back in after that small dip. So if you see patterns like that in the metrics, you know that this is also still a solid team, reliable team, but they're dealing with reality. They replan and go back to stability. And we see project metrics that look like this. So where the PPC is all over the place, the commitment level is all over the place, and the PRC is all over the place. And that's basically where, you know, the team could benefit. They're novices at production planning, and they need quite a bit of help, not just with the mechanics of how the last planner system works, but how to actually adjust their team structure, how they approach planning, perhaps their get a handle on unplanned constraints and various things that have to do with the restructuring efforts to get them back to stability. So that's what we're seeing between 2014 and 2016. That's when we realized that this stuff works because we're running some fairly significant projects, and we're seeing some significant change in team behavior when we introduce the commitment level and the percent required complete, where now the teams overall are not just focused on near-term stability, but also on how to align the whole project to achieve targets on some significant multi-billion-dollar projects for over a year and a half of using the metrics. So at that point, we've done parallel research, worked with Marcelo. He was a PhD faculty at Southern Illinois. We did some data mining, and we found that those metrics are telling us something useful. We published it at IGLC in 2016, the International Group of Lean Construction. And I don't know how I ended up as the keynote speaker, the first speaker in the day, and I had the longest slot. So I stood up there and basically said, okay, PPC target should be 100%, CL should be, after defining the metrics, and commitment level should be 100%, and PRC should be 100%. So that created some really interesting discussions in the room, because that's the first time anybody said it's not 75%, it should all be 100%. We argued quite a bit, and Glenn Ballard was in the audience, and he said, yeah, it should be 100%, and the rest is history. So there's basically now an acknowledgement that these metrics targets, because they're goals, should be high, and as a goal, if it's less than 100%, we have room for improvement. Worked with Farouk after that for another year on validating the metrics, because one of the things that in the research we couldn't validate was the tasks anticipated metric. We couldn't see a correlation between tasks anticipated and reliability. There were better ways to improve look-ahead reliability, and including the commitment level. So Farouk and myself, for another year, worked on validating the metrics, and we did a survey of all the production planning metrics, and there is the paper there if anybody is interested. So I'm sharing these because there's a lot of work that went into the metrics, and I'm giving people pointers to go and kind of dig deeper into the theory behind the need for the new metrics. So these two papers here go deep into the new last planner metrics, commitment level, percent required complete, and the survey of all the possible metrics that existed in the industry at the time in the paper with Farouk. Our projects continue, so now several years in the works. These are real metrics from mega projects looking, this happens to be for Sutter Health, where these broke every benchmark. A couple of projects in San Francisco that finished for the on target or ahead of schedule, on budget or under budget, and met all the requirements that were set at the start of design. And then they should be familiar. So that was our test bed for these metrics when they were first created. And we followed the projects for several years. Sutter, and at the time, because the metrics were developed in collaboration with Sutter project managers, Digby Christian at the time, and Panos Lamsis, Digby took this on as initiative to spread these through the industry. And he got involved in the LPS 2020 benchmark and published a paper in the LCI journal about the new metrics. So that's another source that now talks about how the metrics should be used to drive production. So the paper that was written in 2016 defined the metrics. What Digby and Mauricio wrote was basically how to use the metrics to drive production, recommendations to drive production. So that's another reference point that I highly recommend that you guys look at. So at the same time, the 2020 Last Planner benchmark was published by P2SL, and as you flip through it, you will find that the commitment level, percent required complete, and milestone variance are now recognized as Last Planner metrics. The TAC planning is recognized as a work structuring method within the Last Planner system. Both the pull plans, the phase plans, reverse phase plans, and the TAC plans would provide basically what's now called the project execution strategies. That's the long range plan that builds a production system. It defines it creates well-defined phases of work, and it allows the system to work as a pull system that kind of maximizes or emphasizes the right parts of the system that should flow, especially when TACT is used for crew flow and material flow and logistics flow. And now that gives us a much stable start for the make-ready process, the look-ahead planning, the weekly work planning, and the commitment management. And with the new metrics, now we have a way to tie all of these pieces together so that the team at any point in the process, whether they're at the beginning looking at the milestone, they'll see the impact of the variation on the milestone with milestone variance. With commitment level and percent required complete, they can see the linkage between make-ready planning and phase planning, so they can properly implement the screening rule and the feedback to improve the phase plan if there is a lot of variation in the make-ready. And then at the level of the work plan, is the team consuming the work at the right rate? And if they're not, what are we going to do about it today, not several weeks from now when we say the impact on the target? So that basically closed the gap. So the metrics would allow us to close the gap between what we're doing on a day-to-day basis and the target we're trying to hit several months, sometimes a year out in the future if we're planning with TACT. So we have now a bridge or a dashboard that would link all of this together in real time. So how does this all work? If we put it together from the perspective of how you run or steer production towards target with the Last Planner system, that's kind of the way a project would start. So we need to agree on a goal and intermediate goals. We build a production system. We design a production system. So we don't just simply do a reverse-based schedule anymore. We need to figure out what targets we're trying to hit, how we're going to flow, what really matters for that type of project. Would it benefit from TACT planning? If it's so unique, is it just simply a sequencing activity? What are the intermediate targets, and how are we going to prioritize to hit those targets? So we build a production system based on pull. And then we execute at a given point in time. That's any time in the project execution. The goal of what the production system is to drive the work towards the the target. We want to know at any point in time the variation from the target so we can adjust the future. Obviously, this is very different from project controls where we have a plan. So what the production system plan could become the baseline, and then project controls would measure the variation from the baseline. There's no inherent conflict between the two. Their purposes are different. So you need both. On a project, you need to drive your production to hit the targets, acknowledge there's variation in the workflow, and change the future if your goal is to hit the targets. And then obviously you want to measure if you did what you thought you were supposed to do based on contract, so we can pay people appropriately. The way we would manage production on a looking forward basis is through the look ahead process. So we need a healthy look ahead. We need to screen it for constraints. And then we need to be able to capture the work plan activities. Here we need to measure commitment level. At the time we start the work plan, we measure the commitment level to identify so that the team can focus on what matters when they commit to work for the work plan. And then we look back at the previous work plan to see if, as a team, we committed to, we actually finished what we said we were going to do, that's PPC, and how much of that was actually required based on pull from the production system. And then if there are variances, what are the root causes? So we have an improvement mechanism working. So now different people in the team, whether they're phase champions, whether they're work stream champions, whether they're production staff, now they have a place in the system, and the information is presented to them in a way that they can now use it on a regular basis. If there's variation, so percent required complete or commitment level is low, there would be a variance from the target, and it's easy to replan when the variance is low. So the replan step should trigger immediately. So there will be a task force to say, okay, here is the work the way we planned it previously, and what should we do? We need to work faster, smarter, or both. We either change the plan because we found a better way. We resequence the work. We find that a weekend extra day here and there might help, so we can put the right teams on a recovery plan where we have simple adjustments that get us back on target. And then we measure milestone variance to make sure that we're still hitting the target. So this becomes like the way you execute. I kind of explain this in the context of a GPS. So the steering production towards target with last planner, when you have the right guidance, it's like driving a car with a GPS. Variation is when you make a mistake and when you drive, and the GPS is going to reroute you to either find the shortcut or try to let you hit the target. And when there is no way to get to the target on time, we'll tell you you're going to miss it by this many minutes. And that's basically when you have to have a serious discussion about, okay, we've done everything we could. There's nothing we can do. We should now talk about a different target. And then you adjust the target. But it's a very open, transparent discussion. Our goal is to have a realistic plan always moving forward. So what are the critical factors for success? None of what I said here would work if your pull plan is disjointed. So we need to create plans that flow with basically clear relationships, clear handoffs, clear roles, clear control mechanism that would get us from one task to the next all the way to the target. Work sequencing and clarity of task definitions is paramount if we're trying to create production systems. As many in the industry believe that when you do that, you run into constraints in make-ready planning. You need to track your constraints somewhere in a constraint log. A constraint is work. It's not maybe work that you need to do. It's a work that somebody else needs to do, and they can't do it unless somebody else gives them what they need. So basically constraints, the way we would recommend the industry looks at them is it's something in the eye of the beholder. unless it's completely out of your constraint or of your control, and you just want to fix the constraint to a date. It still needs to be part of the plan because you want to know what tasks that you control the constraints are affecting. So your constraints should not be part of some other system. They should be integral part to your pull so that they can forecast just like any other task in your production plan forecasts. And it's not enough to do the pull plan. They don't manage themselves. So you need to organize your team so that you have champions for planning, production leads, you have work stream champions. Sometimes you have senior people, junior people, you want to pair them together. They can help each other. The junior people can learn not just how to manipulate the tasks in the production system, but they also would learn the business by simply teaming up with a more senior person. So you can grow your team and create a group of production planners that are now responsible for production management and control. And that's how you sustain implementations for a very long time with a very large number of people. And then you have to replan. When the plan forecasts that it doesn't meet the targets, the most immediate action is to assign champions to figure out where we can gain back the time. And that could be in the tasks in front of us, or it could be anywhere in the path to the target. So the fix could be anywhere. We're trying to replan the future, and the future is now connected to the target. And we can make an impact anywhere in the plan. The further you go down to the right, obviously you want to engage maybe other people outside of the near-term horizon. So sometimes the fix is by adding resources later in the project, or working overtime, or changing sequence and making adjustments, but the adjustments need to be made so that the future aligns with the target. So basically, you're running production this way. You're going to figure out what takes the longest based on pull. You're going to identify what's running late, how late, and take immediate action to correct it. And you want to ask yourself if the team is consuming the pull from the production system at the right rate, and are they completing it at the right rate, and measure variances so that you can adjust and improve. Pictures from a real project would look like this. So it's on the far left, that's a milestone plan. Bit right next to it, to the left, are the phase plan, the pull plans, the tag plans, and I'm showing here basically the complexity of dependencies between the various phases of work. So this could be done by potentially hundreds of people on a project where each group is responsible for a certain phase of work. The pull system now is built as a production plan. It feeds the look-ahead tasks. So that's the task right to the right of the phase plans is the look-ahead. Now it's informed by the pull. The team can now add constraints, break down activities, detail them, assign them to the right resources, and then commit and status and gain the metrics so we can link what's happening on a weekly work plan to the targets in the system with the advanced metrics. Here's another example. Just take a simple task of dropping an air handler on a roof. You can't do that without having a building. So there's the air handler task right there at the very, very small dot over here. And that's what the team had to do to get there. And they could fix the target a year away and still hit it a year away by having that constant alignment between what they're doing in design, what they're doing in execution, until they get to the point where they achieve that target. You can learn more about the metrics. There's quite a bit of literature now on this. So the original paper that introduced the metrics, you'll find it at the IGLC 2016. That basically defines the metrics, and then Digby's work in 2020, you'll find it in the LCI journal, would give you some serious recommendations about how to implement it with teams. There's many presentations by our users. You'll find them under this link, and they talk about how they basically implemented the full range of all the capabilities of the last planner system, whether they started from scratch and finished on schedule, on target with some very, very large teams spanning several years, or if they started in mid-construction. There's several examples of recovery planning where they have taken up, basically jumped in the middle of construction and then restructured the project and still finished on time when there was a lot of concern that the milestones were at significant risk. So last planner system works, but teams have to take it seriously. It's not a system that's designed for information to be fragmented. If we want to do last planner right, we need to really integrate all the pieces of the work, from the milestone to the phase plan to the execution strategy, to the look ahead, to the weekly work plan, and have a way to guide ourselves, because it's very complex. The work is complex. We need a way to know where we're at and see the forest for the trees. And these new metrics are a way to basically let us be in the detail and be very mindful of where we're going. And with that, I'm going to stop and see if we have questions, Eileen.
All right, so there are actually some questions, and I want to remind people that now is a good time for the plus delta. For those of you who are not on at the beginning, pluses are things you thought added value to the presentation, and deltas are things you think we should change to add more value to the presentation. So let's get that feedback going in the questions box. So Samar, we're going to go back to the beginning of your webinar where you were talking about screening and shielding and all of that. The question is, what is the screening rule and shielding rule?
So these have been in last planner since day one. If you go back to the very, very early writings, talk to Glenn, the screening rule is basically says the look ahead is about what can be done. So somebody has to say, you can't have something that based on the schedule cannot be done. It's in the past. Be on the work plan. Or if you have a work stream that says, something we know cannot be started for another 6 months, and your look ahead horizon is 4 weeks, and somebody wants it to start, it can't. So that's the screening rule. It says you can only allow work that can start or finish within the look ahead horizon to be on the look ahead. If you want other things to show up, you need to change the schedule, because the schedule says it can't start. It shouldn't be on the look ahead. So that's basically a way to protect the near-term plan from a bad schedule. That's what the screening rule is. The shielding rule is about shielding the worker from a bad manager. So if the worker knows something can't start, it's not yet in the work plan, they have a right to refuse to do the work. It's just, I'm on vacation and they're trying to give me a task. It just doesn't work. So that's the shielding rule. We need to acknowledge that if somebody knows something cannot start or finish within the work plan horizon, it's foolish to pretend that it would. We need to do something about why it can't start rather than assume it would start. So that's the shielding rule. And they're often ignored because just I don't know why, but if teams pay attention to this, I think they can get a lot closer to the root cause of variation much quicker.
Okay, I want to let everybody know that these questions and plus deltas will be going directly to Samar, so he'll have a chance to look at everything and get back to you directly. So since this is an educational webinar and not a webinar about vPlanner in and of itself, if you have specific questions about vPlanner or other software, I am not going to answer them on this webinar. I'm not going to ask them on this
Agreed.
webinar, my apologies, but they will go directly to Samar and he'll be able to follow up with you, no problem at all. So our next question is, and I've gotten so many questions, I need to scroll up here. How do you factor in extra work and change orders into the schedule?
Extra work or change orders into the schedule. So maybe start with change orders. A change order is basically a change to the scope. So there is a scope change. The schedule needs to accommodate it. So there will be an update to the schedule, and then it rolls from a production planning point of view. You pull plan it, incorporate it in your TAC plan. If there's a TAC plan, you agree on how much it is, and now it's part of the work. not, maybe if I'll ask for a clarification on the other part of the question. What?
Okay, again, if you have that clarification, please put it into the questions box and we will get to it right away. Let's go to a comparison here. Do you compare the master schedule date versus the actual milestone date?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this should be clarified, because the master schedule and production plan should always reflect the date you that is possible. The baseline date is the contract date, and I think it's probably, my guess is that that's the question, is about the baseline. If the baseline is 3 months ago and you haven't done anything about it, that's a failure in project controls. Why is that? It's if everybody in the team knows that the project cannot hit the work, there's no way to hit that date. You can put all the resources in the world on it and still not hit it. Your baseline is worthless. So the discussion should be about adjusting the baseline to reflect reality. And I can't tell you how many projects we get involved in where the team is trying to hit a target that was 3 months ago. And it's like, how do you plan to a target this, unless you have a time machine? That's a discussion that should never happen. So the baseline should always be updated to reflect reality. And the controls function on the project should negotiate the right commercial terms so that the master schedule and the baseline are always giving us realistic targets. And that's how you align project production control with project controls. Without that, it's very hard to manage work. It's just there's too many political discussions that are not about production. They're not useful for production management.
Okay, we've got a lot of great plus deltas coming in, so keep them coming. We do have some clarification on the extra work and change order, along with another question that goes with it. So the clarification is extra work is a change order. And the question is, are you saying that if there is a change order, you should re-pull the work and redo the TACT plan?
Yeah, I mean, how would you execute otherwise, right? Yeah, if it's the work changed, we thought we're going to do X and now we're doing Y, the plan has to change, I would say, yes.
Okay, let's go back up to these questions here. How detailed do you think we should plan tasks? For example, for engineering submittal, should we put it in a task, submit civil drawing, or break it down into several intangible steps?
I think it needs to be broken down to the way the work is executed. So I've seen, and so I'll start on the CPM side. I've seen CPM schedules that would have a section in the schedule for submittals and it's like a big window of time, which is fine when you're kind of starting. But once you're in production control, when you're in the details for the work, that 150-day window is for the fabricator to kind of get a sense of how long it takes to do the whole thing. You want to break it down so that you know what's the lead time to release areas. If you tacted the project and you have several work areas, it's no longer 150 days. It's like, what is the cycle time to get us for the first area, the second area, the third area. You don't want your whole building skin system for a high rise to show up all at once. So you want to batch it. And so you can start at that high level, but at some point before you go into detailed production planning, yeah, these things need to be broken down to match production flow at the job site.
So since TACT was mentioned on that in that question, we've had several questions pop up about TACT. What are your thoughts on TACT? Do you let's see, there was another question down here. I'm trying to find them all so I can ask them all together. But it was basically, what are your thoughts on TACT? And I'll find it, I promise.
While you're looking, TACT planning is an integral part of building that execution strategy. So for projects that can benefit from TACT, and so if you're building a project that is so unique and there is like a small enough that it's purely a sequence of work, a simple reverse-based plan is all you need. If the work phases in the project have enough similar steps, process steps in them, so the building could be completely different. It could be as complex as you can imagine, but the work within the building can be broken down to similar processes. Your project can benefit from TAC planning, and you should consider it. The reason for that is when you flow the work based on TACT, you set production targets, you calculate them. So there's several other webinars I'm doing on how you actually use TACT to build and calculate targets for your production system before you have all the detail. It helps you organize your master plan, your execution strategy, so it has a notion of flow in it from the beginning. Your clues are organized to flow. You have a sense of how you're going to break down your areas within the building, whether it's 4 or 5 or 6 areas, and you can have those as options. So TACT analysis would help kind of build good production systems, good execution strategies from the very, very start of a project. And then you obviously validate that throughout as more information comes in. When I send the feedback, I'll include a link to a webinar I've done for LCI as well back, I think, December, Eileen, on using TACT to build execution strategies. And there is a paper that will come out in IGLC in next month about the same topic, wrote it with Iris. So I'll follow up with the link to the published paper when it's available as well. Did you find the question?
I did, yes. Let's see here. Can you talk to your experiences in developing a TACT plan for a non-repetitive floor plan? And how long does it take in advance of work to build the TACT, and who is best to be involved?
It can. We've done something we bring up quite a bit in the workshops that we do with P2SL with Iris Tomaline. At P2SL, they have developed work density methods for non-similar or non-repetitive TAC planning. It takes quite a bit. It takes analysis, but it can be done. And you need to do it with people that know the work very well. And then you can really have crews flow through a building that has some really mixed densities of work and still get them to flow to a reasonable beat.
Okay, I want to remind everybody, go ahead and put those plus deltas into the questions box. We'd love that feedback from you.
Yeah, and just on that, I would highly recommend for the person that asked is to look at P2SL website, reach out to Iris, because they're doing amazing things related to work density for this similar work.
Thank you for that. You had mentioned a research paper for mega project metrics. What is the research paper, and where would we be able to find it?
Yeah, I'll include the links in the follow-up.
Wonderful. How do you factor in location on site in your schedule?
So if the team is implementing TACT as the execution strategy, obviously location management is paramount. It's an integral part of how you think. So that's a natural part of implementing TACT on projects.
Our next question is, do the construction contract documents attempt to use the LPS metrics to somehow track contract compliance?
They could. I think the point of the webinar here is to really increase the awareness how teams choose to apply or mandate or not mandate. That it's really up to them. I know some of our clients on the owner side, they change their reporting structure so they pay attention to commitment level and percent required to complete, because that's basically their gauge if the team is a high performing team or not. If they start seeing these metrics drop week after week, they typically expect the team to be doing extensive replanning.
This is kind of goes along with that, the replanning aspect. How do you manage or adjust when the milestone schedule proves to be inaccurate? Do you have any guidance on getting to a more accurate milestone schedule?
Yes. If your project can benefit from TAC planning, you should do that. That's how you uncover real phases of work and real milestones. Industry, when and that's really based on experience. The way I'm going to answer it is we work with teams, and sometimes we ask for, give us your milestones. They come back and give us every, other task in the schedule that has a date, and they call that milestones. And that's not really true. Not every task with a date is a milestone. The way we look at milestones is basically the key boundaries for work phases. So when do I start the high overhead in a project? When should I finish the high overhead? How should the overhead take overall? And how do we validate that against what comes next? So a good, well-defined structure for your work phases with clear boundaries between the phases would help shape the milestone definitions and the milestone targets. And TAC planning is at the execution strategy level is a great way to build schedules with clear work phases and clear milestones.
So this is kind of going along with what you just said, but I want to ask it anyway. It's still about milestones. As milestones are the benchmarks to align weekly work plan to the master schedule, how do we strategically pick milestones for projects? And that's about, as I call it, strategery.
That's the $1 million question. Actually, the webinar I'm going to share about TAC planning kind of talks a little bit about that. So the challenge with asking a team to go and come back with a phase plan for a project that they have done before, they go and reference previous projects. They reference them from CPM schedules because that's where the data is sitting typically. The challenge with that is the way that CPM schedules are calculated or structured is they don't have a well-defined phasing strategy. So you would look at a project and it's floor by floor in the CPM, in the WBS structure. And it starts from overhead and it ends with commissioning under the same WBS. So how the heck are you going to know the boundaries for overhead or the boundaries for framing or the boundaries for finishes on a project? It's from the earliest possible day until the project is done. So the durations are useless. So I stopped personally asking teams to come back and give us durations. What we do is we work with experienced people on the project, superintendents. We work with when we have a chance to do tact on a project, we create work sequences for standard activities. We take durations, the total project duration, we chunk it into reasonable parts, and then we use that as a way to figure out what's a reasonable phase duration when we are trying to build an execution strategy on tact. So it's a mix of art and science, but I'm less reliant on pre-existing CPM data because it's just we've tried every possible way and it just doesn't give us good durations. Sometimes you can start with that and the team's like, this too long. So then you'd ask, well, what's a reasonable duration for a phase? Because they look at the schedule and it's like a year and a half, but they know it's like 6 months. So that's a starting point, and obviously you need to validate it with analysis. You need to look at the work density, you look at your work steps, and you need to calculate your TAC target, and that would kind of give you an affirmation that this is a reasonable phase duration, phase target, or not. So it takes a little bit of back and forth. Both a piece of it is art, experience, and a piece of it is analytical.
Our next question is, when working with trades that are new to LPS and have limited data on actual production rates, how do you help them develop more reliable plans faster?
So it starts with a good sequence of work and then the rigor to try to implement it. So you want to work with the team very quickly to kind of get what is in everybody's head in a clear sequence of work. The way we look at a pull plan, it's a pure finish to start network. So there's no guesswork. if the team that did the pool plan leaves the project and you have another team, the new team can look at what they did and understand exactly what they meant. So the plans, when you're done with them, your pool plans, when you're done with them, should speak for themselves. And then it becomes an objective fact. So if somebody disagrees with the pool plan, we should change the pool plan. If there's a new perspective on how to do the work, at least we know what we thought when we built the first pool plan. If there's a better way, let's change the plan. So that's how you basically engage the team, so they are completely transparent with each other. The pool plans would have crews and they would have relationships. They're not baselines, so the team is free to adjust the pool plan any way they want, because the whole purpose of the pool plan is to link the work we're doing today to the target we're trying to hit 6 months from now. And if we find a better way to hit the target, we should change the plan. It's a forecast mechanism. And then you get the team to buy into the pool plan by basically believing that the work that they collaborated on is actually happening. So you want to follow the pool plan in the weekly work plans, and that's how you get the team to subscribe that this is real. We're not just doing it because somebody thought it's a great idea to do a pool plan.
Okay, our next question is a statement and a question. So bear with me as I read this to you here. There is another way to work around the PPC metrics, which is by marking the activity complete and adding another activity to extend the duration of the activity. If the activity has float, then this wouldn't create a late path. Is it a matter of creating a team with integrity for this to not happen?
Not necessarily. I mean, the way I would look at the work plan activities is if the task, if people make mistakes, right? So that somebody could commit to a task and they honestly didn't mean to, and now it's counted towards the work plan, or somebody could report that the task isn't done, and it happens once a task is done and it's not done, so you create a new task. It, I would never expect 100% perfection of anything in design and construction or anything. So you want to give people some slack. The metrics are not there to punish people. They're really there to help them guide the team towards the targets. So if the plan, the focus is really on the path to completion, and variation is the natural byproduct of working in design and construction. We try to minimize it, but we want to know it exists so we can minimize it. So the forecast and the late paths and the commitment level and percent required complete are simply gauges. And if the team really understands why they're doing glass planner, none of this matters. What matters is adjusting the future to hit the target. And they're simply guiding tools.
Our next question is, how do creativity, motivation, and problem solving fit into the last planner system? Is there room for human factors in such structured planning methods?
Of course, because there's nothing that would be in the plan without a human contributing to the plan. One of the things I believe, we always talk about respecting people. Obviously, that's paramount in design and construction. But you respect workers by respecting the work that they do. So when you involve trade partners, you involve designers in a pool plan, the way you would respect them as a larger team is by respecting the work. They plan things. It would be great if they only do them once, not 3 or 4 times. So that's how I look at respect. Respecting the workers through the respecting the work that they do. And obviously, there is no plan without their input. It's not these pool plans are not plans that are done in a vacuum. They're done with the team, by the team.
Okay. Our next question is, most of the challenges we face are during the design phase where we don't implement tact. We set milestones through design, but invariably with push in having user group meetings. The milestones change meaning and new milestones are added. How could we get better at this?
So it depends on your circle of influence on a project. So if you're designing, delivering a design, and then starting building, that's one situation where it's hard to solve that problem. If you're an integrated team where design and construction are planned together, an integrated project delivery team or a design build team where you have the opportunity to link design and construction, design milestones can be phased to follow the sequence of construction. Majority of our work is fast track work, whether it's in in manufacturing or in healthcare. None of these projects anymore can be designed and then built. They are designed while they're being built. So how do you approach it? You approach it by understanding. Well, let me put this in some other words. So it's just, I'm an architect, so one way to look at a building is it's all new and I can do anything, which is fine if you have a clean slate and there's no constraints on what you do. Or you can approach a new building if you're in a fast track project as an existing building. So once you lock in your columns, your electrical rooms, your elevators, you can treat them as an existing condition. No architect in the right mind would see an elevator shaft and they want to move it 3 feet down the hallway because it's there, it's fixed. So when you release information, you want to acknowledge that this is fixed. I'm not going to change it. There's other ways I can adjust the design to deal with variation that comes in later, but what is released is fixed. It's basically, it could be poured or it's already in fabrication. Or so if we acknowledge that, I think we can, in fast track projects, simplify how we manage design and chain it so that it has more time to be done more perfectly. Because we give ourselves more time instead of an arbitrary, let's issue 100% CDs and then construction could be waiting a year before they touch some of the information in the CDs. How do we structure what we provide, sensitive to the fact that if we provide things early, we need to stick to them. We need to do everything in our power not to change them because they're going to be disruptive to construction.
Our next question is going to go back to tasks. Do you encourage tasks to be daily or is weekly more manageable? Recognizing that for every task, you need to status them as well, such as when the task is a week or longer.
So this depends on what you're measuring. If you are, if there's no handoff in the task, so that's kind of that's the litmus test. Is if the task has a handoff to another person within the team, you need to capture the task. So it becomes 2 tasks because you need to know what you're finishing, so you know what you're starting. There's no handoff. There's no need to split. And the question stems from analog methods because you would want to represent what you're doing on a day, and the only way to do that is by putting a sticky in a day in the work plan. When you use electronic systems, they can manage when a task needs to start based on pull and when it needs to finish, and there's no interruption, there's no handoff, there's no need to split it. The system should help you keep it intact, and as long as it's on target, it's on target.
Samar, I have a question for you. People have been seeing your webinar, they've given us the plus deltas. What is the one thing that you think people should get out of the webinar and take back and say, this is what I saw, this is what my aha moment?
Yeah, there is a more complete last planner system understanding than what it was in 1999, 2000. And it's beyond just having a look ahead and a weekly work plan off of a master schedule. It's a last planner as it exists today is a comprehensive system from milestones to phase plans to TAC plans to look aheads to weekly work plans to metrics that would align all of these phases together. And that's what I'm hoping people leave with is if you're struggling with your last planner implementation, know that there is a more improved last planner that you should look at because a lot of the struggle is from the disjointed information and the misalignment between a baseline schedule and reality. So maybe start thinking about how do you structure your project, your system, your understanding of production so that you don't have that core problem that makes it harder and harder to execute work.
Okay. The next question follows up on the last question that we talked about on task duration. In construction, do you allow tasks to span longer than a week with no handoff, or create a partial completion target for the week?
Like I said, it depends on what you're measuring. If you're just measuring that it's Friday, I would say just let it be the way it is. There's no, you don't measure anything by saying it's Friday. You can just let it go to the next week, and it finishes on Monday or Tuesday on the next work plan exactly when it's supposed to finish. So you're just creating extra work for no reason. If the task on Friday would release somebody to do a weekend work on Saturday, you absolutely need to split it, because you need to know what has to finish so that the next thing can start. That's the only test I would say you should apply to whether you split a task or not. Does it create a handoff, or are you splitting it because it's Friday?
All right. Our next question is, have there been any projects where TACT was implemented during the design phase that you're aware of?
A handful. It would be in the more production phases of design, where we're starting to see population of models and handoffs to detailed coordination, detailing, fabrication. That's where I would see design being tacted. The earlier phases of design, they're harder to tack just because they're designers are in this mode of exploration, and for that, they still work in linear time, so they need targets, and they need to be able to know when they should stop exploring and just start honing in into production. So TACT planning can organize detailed design, and that would help designers figure out, okay, what are the markers, what are the decisions along the way, that here is where we need to start making choices and moving with those choices so we can hit production targets.
All right. I do want to mention that we are out of time. Elsie, I would like to thank vPlanner for sponsoring the webinar, and Samra for presenting the webinar, and all of you for attending the webinar. Thank you so much, everybody. This was being recorded. A copy of the recording and slide deck will be sent to all participants by Samra from close of business tomorrow. Thanks again, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you all.